Hello everyone, this is SWTOR Snoopy here, back with another video. Today I have for you guys another Star Wars Republic discussion episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about my final thoughts on Master Mode chapters. Now, I recently finished every Master Mode chapter of Knights of the Fallen Empire and Knights of the Eternal Throne. So I want to talk about my experience and give my honest opinion on the process and the difficulty of these chapters. In this video, there will be talking points on the screen and in the description down below. This will allow you guys to jump to a particular point I talk about and to follow the video in an easier manner. Anyways, that's all I have for this intro, so I hope you guys enjoy. If you do, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's jump right into this discussion. Alrighty guys, let's get into this discussion right now. So the first talking point we're going to be going over is going to be simply, are the chapters fun? Now this is semi-subjective, as I know a lot of people would agree that if you didn't really enjoy Knights of the Fallen Empire and Knights of the Eternal Throne, that these Master Mode chapters won't be too enjoyable if you play them. And I can understand that, and I completely agree that if you didn't enjoy the chapters the first time around, it's not like this is going to change your opinion. However, I have to say, for what it's worth, I thought that the increase of difficulty really did make the chapters more enjoyable, at least to me. And that's mainly because, like I said, the challenge. The main thing that I had an issue with the Knights of the Fallen Empire and Eternal Throne is that they were very, very easy the first time I played through them, and that was with the regular story mode. And I can understand why it's easy, because obviously this is for all of the players, whether they are a more casual player and or a more hardcore player. It allows everyone to enjoy the story and see what the game has to offer. But just playing this through in Master Mode, every single chapter, was really, really fun for me. I know that there were some spikes in difficulty, which were a little difficult to tackle, but at the same time, it really did make it much more enjoyable, eventually taking down that boss that was giving you trouble, and or learning from your mistakes. Because the thing with these Master Mode chapters is it's really a game of figuring out where you went wrong and how to fix it. There's some things that are pretty overtuned, not gonna lie, but the good thing about this is you can tackle all the chapters if you're very careful. But some of it has to do with the class you're playing on, because if you're playing a very strong class, it will be easier. But if you're playing one of the weaker classes that doesn't have many self-heals or things along the lines of that, it can be pretty difficult. But that's the main thing that I really had fun with. The main thing that I got out of this whole entire thing is that it really made me enjoy the chapters a lot more, as I wasn't really playing it too much for the story, because I had already seen the story, but it was really enjoyable just to go back into these chapters and kind of see the boss mechanics. That's a big thing as well, is that these bosses do have some pretty cool mechanics, but when you are playing it on story mode, you don't really have to see too many of those, as you can just go through everything and have no issues. It's not really a risk of dying, but with these Master Mode chapters, there is that risk. But I had a really fun time, and I had some issues, but I was able to recover. And I think that's the main thing that I really got out of this, is that it can challenge you in some cases, and it can be very, very good in that regard. So personally, my main thing is I thought the chapters were very fun in the Master Mode variant. Now, if you didn't enjoy them through the first playthrough, I still would highly recommend trying this, as you can, of course, spacebar the cutscenes and whatnot if you aren't interested in the story. But I gotta say that I really did enjoy the challenge, and I thought it was a very good time. So the next talking point we're going to be going over is the difficulty spikes. Now, I knew when making this discussion I would have to absolutely include this, as when you do these Master Mode chapters, there are some difficulty spikes. They are very noticeable, but at the same time, you can directly counter them, and you can eventually succeed. I would say the biggest difficulty spike I really saw in all of these Master Mode chapters was Knights of the Eternal Throne Chapter 2. And I know a lot of people can agree with this. This is one of those chapters that is very infamous when it comes down to the difficulty spike. Because at the end of the chapter, you have 3 elite mobs that you have to battle. I don't want to spoil the story if you haven't played already. But there's 3 elite mobs that are very, very challenging. And they can do an insane amount of damage. So you have to be very tactical. And not gonna lie, I had to figure out the mechanics and eventually succeed. But even though the difficulty spike was a little annoying, just learning the mechanics and dying a couple times, it still was interesting, as it was one of those goals where, you know, I knew that if I got a good run in and I was eventually successful and I timed stuff correctly, I could be successful and eventually win. And I think that's the big thing with this, is realistically with these Master Mode chapters, all they really are is it's just a game where everything is increased damage, increased HP, and all of that. So as a lot of people would say, it's kind of artificial difficulty. But still, even though it's technically artificial difficulty, I still thought it was fun, as it did give me something to do. And it really allowed me to see you know, how difficult some stuff can be and how you can work around that stuff. But my main thing with the difficulty spikes is if you do eventually learn the mechanics and you figure out what you gotta do, it can be pretty straightforward. I think that's the biggest thing to really take away from these chapters, is it becomes a game of learning the mechanics. Because once you learn the mechanics of some of the enemies and how much damage they do, it really isn't that bad. I think the biggest thing out of all of this is after you fight so many Sky Troopers, you soon realize that their AoE ability, where they just shoot in all directions, hurts a lot. And also that getting stabbed can hurt a lot. It's just really all these small little abilities. You start to learn them eventually, and it's kind of fun because it's like you figure out what you gotta do, and then eventually you can just try and counter it in some way, shape, or form. But if I would, you know, I would have to say that it's not like it goes in order with the difficulty, as in if you go into more chapters, you know, the further you get through, the harder it gets. It's not really that at all. So if there's one thing I do have to say, is that don't expect to jump into this and it's just going to start really easy in Master Mode on like Chapter 1 of Knights of the Fallen Empire. And then eventually going to Eternal Throne, it's going to get way, way harder as you go on. That's the one thing that is a little unfortunate, is that there are some chapters in there that are way, way, way harder than other ones that are further on in the story. Some things I could argue, and I think a lot of players would agree, are slightly overtuned, but granted, that is kind of the point of these, is to make them incredibly difficult. But if you are careful, you can succeed. But I did have to, you know, include that in there, is that if you're going to do this, then just be aware that you are going to have to be very careful with how you deal with some of the bosses and enemies, as stuff can kill you very fast. No matter if they're an elite enemy and or a standard enemy, everything does hurt in here. There's going to be some difficulty spikes, but overall it still is a very enjoyable time. But if you are going to get into this, it is something that should be mentioned. So I've been going on and on about all this talk about these chapters and talking about, you know, how they are a really fun time. But really, we need to ask the question is, should you attempt them? And that is my next talking point right here. And I personally say yes. I think it is worth attempting them. At the very least, doing a chapter or two just to see how it is. I know that some people will disagree and they don't really enjoy these. And granted, I can completely understand, as it is going through the the story a second time, and some people don't really want to do that. But if you just have some free time and you want to just do something that's kind of relaxing in the game, but at the same time does give you a challenge in some sort, then I say yes, that you should really attempt them, or at the very least do a chapter or two just to see how it is. That's really how I got into it, is I've been slowly but surely doing them, and I have made a guide on the past about, you know, just some basic tips with the Master Mode chapters, because even though I hadn't completed all of them, there is kind of a formula, I guess you could say, just with dealing with them, and it's really just a game of cutting around, just dishing out damage, and eventually learning mechanics, as is with most PvE stuff in this game and other MMOs. But I think it is worth a shot just to try and attempt it. and to see how you really like it. I know there's a lot of people that really don't like that artificial difficulty, as this is realistically just a huge increase and buff in heals and damage. So do keep that in mind when going into this. But at the same time, even though it really is just a buff in those departments, you will have to pay attention to some mechanics of bosses, as in story mode you could cheese it and not have to deal with any of them, but this is slightly different. So that's really all I have to say for should you attempt them. And then finally, going into the last little talking point is going to simply be my overall review and conclusion. Now, if you ask me, I personally believe that the whole entire system of the Master Mode chapters is very fun. I do like that they decide to incorporate these in the game, as they do offer a little extra challenge to do something if you're bored and or you just want to do something a little more difficult that is solo. Personally, it's not something that I would just do all in one go, as that's 100% not what I did. But I would say that it really is a fun time, and I do recommend doing it. Just the main thing to realize is that it is going to hurt quite a bit. You may die a couple times. You may have to learn, how to deal with some stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not too bad. It can get a little difficult, but it is a fun time, and that's personally why I didn't, as I really thought that it was something just to not only just to do something that's a little different, as I know you can just constantly just do the same exact flashpoints and stuff all the time, but I thought it was just challenging for what it was, and I know that's how a lot of people see it. But I think the main thing to realize and the biggest thing to conclude is don't expect anything absolutely extraordinary with these. This is just another way to get some challenging stuff in the game, and another way to spend some time. But if you are up for a challenge, I would highly recommend testing this out and just trying it and seeing if you enjoy it. I know that there's some people that don't, but personally I thought it was a fun time. It's a thing to just do occasionally if you're a little bored. But at the end of the day, I would say that, it is worth just a shot in seeing what you can do with it. Because it really, all it is just, it's what you make of it. And if you are having fun with it, then that is very good. I also forgot to do this at the start, but here are my achievements for Fallen Empire and Eternal Throne. As you can see, I did 100% it, just to showcase that, of course I am telling the truth, just in case people thought I was lying for some reason. But anyways, that's going to be really it for this discussion video on me talking about my final thoughts on the Master Mode chapters. If you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.